The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Greetings, everybody. My name is John Raphael. I'm the Director of Educational Services at the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals, and we are so happy to bring another installment of our project, our 10-part webinar series that we sponsor along with the regional centers for workforce transformation, which are funded by the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. And we started these quite a few months ago, and our obligation to you is to dive into the NADSP, the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals Code of Ethics, a little deeper. And what we're going to do today is do exactly that. These webinars are unique because they're not a typical kind of webinar where it lasts an hour. Usually webinars are an hour. These are shortened to make them, I think, more accessible and convenient for direct support professionals to utilize. Our speaker today, Jen, she's going to go about 20, 25 minutes, and then we're going to have some questions. But ultimately, these webinars are designed to spark your interest in the Code of Ethics, but also get you thinking about the importance of the Code of Ethics. They will be archived on the Regional Centers for Workforce Transformation website, and also we'll archive them on the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals website as well. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce my friend, my colleague, Jennifer Teich. Jen has been in this field a long time, a quarter century. Sorry, Jen. I beat you by a few years, but ultimately Jen has lots and lots of experience in and around this subject of self-determination. And that's what today's webinar is about, and today's Code of Ethics is featuring the tenet self-determination. And Jen's going to give some really great stories. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to my friend and colleague, Jen Teich. So Jen, welcome.
Thank you, John. So today, Today we're going to talk about the tenet of self-determination. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines self-determination as free choice of one's own acts or states without external compulsion. So this can be a tricky one for DSPs to navigate. It means that as a DSP, your values, ideas, and judgments have to be left to the side when supporting someone. It's okay if you don't agree with someone you're supporting, but you need to be able to listen and act from a perspective of that person, not yourself. So at the end of the day, it is the person's right to be able to guide their own lives. There will be times that you don't, there will be times when you recognize in yourself that your own personal beliefs or values can interfere with supporting someone to do something. And at that point, you really need to step back, reread the Code of Ethics, and work from a place of professional service provision. If you feel you can't do this, you need to get a supervisor involved and see if there's another way. So we're going to look at what self-determination looks like through a series of stories that demonstrate good direct support for people where the DSP is in a situation that's challenging, and how do they use the code professionally and ethically. So the tenet is, as a DSP, I will assist the people I support to direct the course of their own lives. There are 5 supporting statements, and we're going to go through each one of the supporting statements with a story. The first statement is to support the rights of the individual to lead self-directed lives, working in partnership with other members of the person's support network. So I'm going to tell you now about David's story. David is a young man who wants to become a Broadway star. His dad is a Broadway producer, and David has grown up around the theater. David's parents don't think that this is a realistic goal for him and discourage his support staff from entertaining the idea. David has a diagnosis of autism. He has a hard time in social situations, and he speaks in a monotone voice. His parents believe those attributes are going to stop him from being successful as an actor and don't want to set him up for disappointment. David still lives with his parents, and he self-directs his services. New York State has a methodology where a person gets a budgeted dollar amount, and you can choose your services and supports and decide how and where those happen. This includes community participation, like David's theater group. Choices are made by the person with the assistance of what's called a circle of support. David's circle is made up of family, friends, service providers, and people from his theater group. David's budget has him spending most of his days volunteering at a soup kitchen, and he receives support from his staff from 10 to 2, 4 days a week. David's circle meets every other month to stay updated. His parents are very involved in his circle and help him oversee his staff. In the past, they have actually fired several staff because they thought they were encouraging him toward his dream of acting. So Mike, David's staff person, has been on the job for 6 months. As he got to know him, he learned how unhappy David is about spending his days volunteering. He really wants to be in the theater. And he also learned that encouraging David could cost him his job. Mike has 2 kids who are depending on his salary. So Mike sees that David looks like he's self-directing his life, but behind the scenes, his parents are really making a lot of the decisions about how he spends his time. They do this from a place of love. They're protecting him. They've watched him get hurt so many times. Is there a way that Mike can assist David to have more control over his services while still keeping the circle together and keeping his job? These are not easy decisions to make. So let's go back to the first supporting statement. Supporting the rights of the individual to lead self-directed lives, working in partnership with other members of the person's support network. Does Mike risk his job and tell the circle that David should have more control over his services? Well, as it turns out, David and Mike are together a few days later at the soup kitchen, and David is complaining about wanting to be at the theater during the day and not the soup kitchen. Mike says, listen, you know I'm going to get in trouble that makes you want to do this so much anyway. And David says, my parents think because of how I talk, I can't be an actor, but I can be a singer. They won't even let me talk about it or sing for them. Mike asks, can you sing? Henry whips out a Broadway show tune and has Mike's completely flabbergasted. He's amazing. Mike gets an idea, and he and David decide that it's time to call a circle meeting. They run to Dunkin' Donuts and get those big cardboard coffee things and a dozen donuts for the meeting. And everybody's hanging out in David's living room, drinking coffee and waiting for the meeting to start. And everyone's there except David. People are starting to think it's a little weird that he isn't there. Then Mike says, ladies and gentlemen, may I present David Miller? And David comes out of the kitchen and sings Somewhere Over the Rainbow and nailed it. Everyone jumped to their feet, were clapping. Mom was crying. David's dad was hugging him. No one, especially David's parents, knew that he could sing like that. David walked over to Mike, slapped him a high five, and gave him a look that said, I got this. So what did Mike do? Mike let David's talent speak for itself. Instead of doing it for David, he found a way for David to take control and advocate for himself. David's talent convinced the circle that he could actually be a successful part of theater, and that they needed to take a step back from protecting him and let him try to make his way as a singer. Here's the second supporting statement. Promoting self-determination, I can't read this, in intellectual, emotional, social, and spiritual pursuits. This is Roger's story. So Roger is a he goes to a day program. He loves watching the Weather Channel, and he's a devout Protestant. Pete is a new DSP who was hired at the group home where Roger lives, and he works the 3 to 11 shift 3 days during the week and every Sunday. Pete is also in his 50s. Pete forgets to check the weather before he goes to work, which usually leaves him without an umbrella in a storm. And Pete's Jewish. Pete is there when Roger gets home from day program until bedtime during the week, and he relieves the overnight staff on Sundays. Pete notices that during the week, Roger is very involved at night reading his Bible, and he also helps him each night to get down on his knees to pray before he goes to bed. But on Sundays, Pete sees that Roger isn't going to church when the other residents do. So he asks Roger, why don't you go to church? You know, you seem to be a really religious guy. And Pete tells him, well, there's only one van. The other 2 people I live with are Catholic, and I'm Protestant. So they get the van to go to church on Sundays. And there's only 2 staff on the house on Sundays. One has to stay back at the house, and the other one is the van driver, and he's also Catholic. So I haven't been to church on Sunday since I've been here for 10 years. And I used to be a deacon at my church. It was great to be part of the Mass every Sunday. I really miss the others that would go to all the great events that they would have. Pete is trying to figure out how he can help Roger get to church, but he's tied to the house, so he knows he can't be the staff to accompany Roger. And the supervisor of the house works from another group home on the other side of town, so there's no one to cover for him to go. And there's only one van. He knows that Roger really misses that part of his life. He feels awful every time he sees him looking at his photo albums that are filled with pictures with him and his friends. So let's go back to the code of ethics. Promoting self-determination in physical, intellectual, emotional, social, and spiritual pursuits. So what does Pete do? What did Pete? Roger advocated to the house supervisor that he should be able to attend church on Sundays. The house supervisor apologized. He had no idea that Roger wanted to go to church. He agreed to a temporary solution of moving his staff from another house for 3 hours on Sunday for Pete to take Roger to church. Roger and Pete could take the bus together. During that time, Pete assisted Roger to reintroduce himself to the church by attending services with him, events, and once Roger was even invited to participate in the children's service at the religious school. Pete knew that the 3 months were going to end and went to the many folks that Roger befriended and told them that his 3 months were coming to an end and that the agency cannot find a staff person to continue to replace him. One of the church patrons, Janice, was shocked to find out that she and Roger lived 2 blocks apart. "I will pick him up. Of course I'll pick him up, and I'll bring him home Sundays. I would love someone to..." So how did Pete help Roger? He helped Roger by connecting him to the supervisor and empowering him to speak up for himself. Roger is still a valued member of his church, and he and Janice are still close and travel together every Sunday. Here's our third supporting statement. Honor a person's right to assume risk in an informed manner. This is Bob's story. And this story is my personal experience providing direct support. My main job for my agency is to coordinate a housing subsidy that enables people to live in their own homes. I work in New York City, so most people live in apartments here. I'm going to tell you a story about Bob. Bob is a 35-year-old man who lived with his parents and wanted to live on his own for many years. He works as a VIP guest service ambassador at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, which is where the Knicks play. He got a really cool job. He meets celebrities every workday and assists them with what he needs. So after much discussion and planning, Bob finally convinced his parents that he could move to his own apartment. He got services twice a week when he's not working from community hab staff, and he's been living there for almost 2 years. One day, about 3 months ago, Bob's superintendent needed to do some repairs to the apartment's kitchen. It required that he make several visits over the course of 1 month. After about 2 weeks, the super called me to let me know that he'd seen this guy in Bob's apartment many times, and he was worried that the guy was living in the apartment, which is actually a violation of his lease. So I called his DSP, Joan, and she reported that she hadn't seen anyone at the apartment, nor had she seen any evidence that someone was staying there. So I went to go see Bob, and Bob told me, "Yeah, my friend's staying with me. He's got nowhere to on the couch." So I explained to him that he's not allowed to have guests for more than 3 nights. It's in the lease that he signed. So we read over his lease together. We had a conversation about how it violated the lease, and he realized that the friend needed to go or he could be evicted. He understood that what he was doing was putting himself in jeopardy of losing his apartment, and he told the friend to go. So a week later, the superintendent had accidentally left his tools at Bob's apartment and made an unannounced visit to pick them up. He not only found the friend there, but the guy was smoking pot on the couch. So, of course, the superintendent called the landlord and told him what he saw and what he knew about this guy. The landlord called me and basically gave us a choice of finding him a new place to live or he was going to evict him. When we went to go see Bob, he confessed that he really did try to get his friend to leave, and he refused to go. And Bob felt really bad throwing him out, so he let him stay. He asked us for help in getting the friend out, and we eventually did get the man to leave. But we needed to find Bob a new place to live. What do I do? Where do we find Bob a new apartment? And do we let him live on his own again, given the bad choices that he made as a tenant? Do we put him in a more restrictive certified setting? Because New York City is so expensive, most certified settings have shared bedrooms. And Bob is really clear that he does not want to live with anybody else, never mind share a bedroom with someone. I wanted to find a place where Bob could receive supports to strengthen his independent living skills. He was going to need more support than he was receiving in his own apartment. Bob's parents and my boss were pretty clear that they were not going to support him to live on his own right now, as he's vulnerable and the risk was really great. So on top of that, Bob's parents insisted that he live in an apartment with 24-hour supports. They were concerned about the drugs, even though Bob's drug test came back negative. So it looked like the only option was to move him into a 24-hour certified setting with a shared bedroom against his wishes. So we went back to the code, honor a person's right to assume risk in an informed manner. What did we do? Bob moved back in with his parents while we tried to figure out a way to give him his independence. Bob's parents insisted on regular drug testing, and he always came up clean. He was doing really, really well. Even though everyone agreed that he wasn't ready to live on his own yet without more supports, his parents began to see that he might not actually need 24-hour oversight. So we worked very hard with OPWDD to turn a two-person supported one-bedroom apartment into a one-person apartment. Bob was also really committed to working with his staff, Joan. So we succeeded in getting Joan switched from ComHead to a relationship with him and provide supports to him in a certain. So we could have easily ignored Bob's argument to live on his own and put him in a 24-hour certified setting. But by acknowledging his right to assume risk and live independently, we provided Bob with the opportunity to fulfill his wishes, which is living on his own. Here's the fourth supporting statement. Recognize that each individual has potential for lifelong learning and growth. This is Susan's story. Susan is a young woman who lives in Staten Island, New York City. She works as a messenger during the day and receives support services in the evenings in her home. Susan dropped out of high school early as she had a really hard time with academics and she really never learned how to read. She's been telling her DSP, Stephanie, that she really hates her job, but she's afraid to leave as she can't do anything else. What else can someone do who can't read? I don't want to clean toilets, and that feels like my only option. I tried to find Susan a different job. Services or janitorial services were all they really had. Susan felt the only way she could get a better job was by learning how to read and hopefully getting her GED high school diploma. So Stephanie assisted Susan to enroll in a GED program at her local college. Susan dropped out after the first week as she felt that she really couldn't learn at the pace of the class. She was very upset and really felt horrible about her failure. So Stephanie assisted her to enroll in an adult literacy course at her local library. The teacher of this course had no experience working with someone with IDD, and Susan lasted one class before dropping out. Stephanie believed that Susan could learn how to read, but was really all out of options. So Stephanie went back to the code, recognized that each individual has potential for lifelong learning and growth. And what could Stephanie do to help Susan reach her goals of learning to read and receiving her GED? Well, a few weeks later, Stephanie was with Susan and Susan's phone rang. She flipped out her flip phone and spoke with her friend for a few minutes. And a light bulb went off for Stephanie when she saw Susan using the flip phone. She thought that if she could get Susan to switch to a smartphone, that she might have more exposure to literacy options. Stephanie spoke to Susan and Susan agreed to try it. So Susan started out by sending one-word texts to Stephanie that Stephanie had helped her learn, and they used literacy apps when they were together. In about 6 months, Susan was texting sentences to Stephanie and able to start searching for her favorite movie clips on YouTube. It took Susan about 2 years to be able to consider going back for her GED, and Stephanie thought they should try a different route this time. Stephanie assisted her to go to the Disability Studies department in the college, and the Disability Study folk agreed to allow Stephanie to accompany Susan to classes to assist her to take notes. So I'm happy to report that Susan is now in her second semester of her GED studies. Stephanie could have easily just seen Susan's inability to figure out how to learn as the end of the road. Instead, she had faith that Susan was going to be able to accomplish what she wanted. And the final supporting statement is to celebrate, accept, and learn from life's rich experiences with people through triumphs and failures. And this is Elvis's story. Elvis is a man who loves to read comic books. He's particular to Marvel Comics, and he knows every issue really well. Elvis also has a group that he runs at his day program around comic books. Elvis has just completed travel training from his residence so that he can go into town and get more comic books for the group. He spent months learning how to get a bus pass, which street to wait on for the bus, and how many blocks and turns it took to get to the comic book store. His first trip to the comic store alone, Elvis and his DSP Billy practiced it together 5 times and made a backup plan of what to do if he gets lost by using his phone. Elvis is so excited to do this alone. He gets on the bus, he hands the driver his card, he takes a seat, and he starts thinking about how the next time he runs his group, they're going to have so much new stuff to talk about. He's so immersed in his thoughts when he looks up and realizes that he missed his stop by a lot. And he's in another town 5 miles away. Well, he remembered his backup plan. He calls Billy as per their agreement. And what does Billy do? So Billy looked to the code: celebrate, accept, and learn from life's rich experiences with people through triumphs and failures. How does Billy promote Elvis to get himself out of this without rescuing him? Billy assures Elvis that everything will be fine. Everybody makes mistakes. And he sends Elvis a Google Maps text that return to town. Elvis is not so happy about that solution, and he asks Billy if he can just pick him up and bring him back to the house. He's really upset. He's scared. He's not. Well, Billy says, wouldn't it be cool if you could do it using the bus? You've spent so much time learning how to use public transportation. This is a great way to show everyone. Eventually, Elvis said he would try, and Billy said he would keep his phone handy, and he'd be ready to pick him up if things didn't go well. So Elvis takes out his phone and follows the Google Maps back to the bus stop. He made it back to the town, and he purchased the comics, got back on the bus, and got home safe. And he did it all without having to have Billy pick him up. Billy could have easily made Elvis feel badly about getting lost. He could have also rescued him and picked him up. Instead, he showed Elvis that he had confidence in him finding his way back.
Wow, Jen, I mean, those stories, we could listen to them all day. It's amazing. What I heard was, well, actually several situations where, once again, direct support professionals, they just don't stop. They're so committed, at least in these stories, to not settling, and that included with um, using the tenets of self determination, the code of self determination. Really, these outcomes are pretty darn good. So wow, well, thank you. Um, let's see. Let me see if there's any questions that are coming our way. Let's see here. Aha. Here's a question. How does a direct support professional, how do they deal with risk? When does a direct support professional kind of notify their supervisor in a situation like the situation where somebody was smoking pot on a person that they've supported their couch? When do you, I guess, call in the cavalry?
As far as the smoking pot on the couch, that was an immediate call to the supervisor. I think when you're dealing with risk and putting yourself at risk as a professional and putting the person at risk, you always need to have backup support with this and not make decisions on your own.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, because I think these oh no moments that often DSPs encounter, I think sometimes they feel alone, but no direct support professional, you know this very well, Jen, no direct support professional in this country of ours ever is completely alone. There's a team, there's a supervisor, there are peers. There's sometimes the person that we support. Sometimes they can give us oftentimes they can give us direction. But
And
I'm sorry. Yes.
I said in families.
And families, yes, thank you. Absolutely. So that's really, really cool. I had a question, or maybe an observation more than a question. It's this technology, right? I think the Susan story with the flip phone, and hey, flip phones are so 1998, you know. But I think ultimately in that situation, there was this observation that, my goodness, the use of technology could help with one's self determination. You want to talk about that a little bit?
But actually, this is, it is a true story. This is somebody who was, very young. She was 25 at the time, and did not use did not use a smartphone. And, the idea that came to Stephanie to do this, and also very, uh, took away the stigmata of somebody using a flip phone, because you don't see people using flip phones.
Right.
Now Susan looks like everybody else on the bus or on the ferry, because she lives in Staten Island, as she goes to work and
Sure.
is busy on her phone, and really did learn how to read by using her phone.
It's really, yeah, just I love it, and I think, I don't know if you think this too, but I think when we do look at technology and just the use of tablets or iPads, whatever you call them, or obviously smartphones and smart technology, I think it opens up the world for people much more uh, than I think we give credit.
Yeah.
You
But look
know,
at the story of Elvis. Elvis got back to the bus by Google Maps.
exactly,
You know,
exactly.
Otherwise, Billy would have had to go pick him up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Think about that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking because you and I have been in this field a long time, and maybe some of the people listening have been in the field a long time. But I think some newer direct support professionals, those of that millennial quote unquote generation, they wouldn't know necessarily what even a paper map was, right? Uh,
Correct.
so I think when we look at the evolution of direct support, certainly when we look at self-determination, technology is huge to really bring people to a place where they can direct the course of their own life a lot. I think in a more efficient way. It's kind of cool.
Great equalizer.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, unfortunately, we have come to the end of our time. I really appreciate the work you put into this webinar, and these stories are wonderful. And just so everybody knows, the stories obviously are, the names have been changed. These aren't the actual names of the people that Jen was talking about, obviously. But the reality is, those stories illustrate, in my opinion, self-determination through and through, and what that means when direct support professionals help people direct the course of their own lives. And those stories that you gave us really show us that, Jen. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. And
Pleasure.
thank you everybody for listening, whoever is listening. These will be, this particular webinar, as well as all the other webinars that we have produced, are going to be archived and available on the Regional Centers for Workforce Transformation's website. That's workforcetransformation.org. Um, and certainly will be available on the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals website, NADSP.org. So with that, I bid you all a good day, and my name is John Raphael with the NADSP, and thank you very much for listening. And again, tune in next month and look for notification next month for our next installment on the code. Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye-bye.